Community Forum is sponsored by the Easton Grange 196 and a friend of Yardley Wood Rink and the Easton Lions Club.
There's a storm across the valley, the clouds are rolling in. The afternoon is heavy on your shoulders. There's a truck out on the 4-lane, a mile or more away. The whining of his wheels just makes it colder.
Welcome to Community Forum. My name is Priscilla Almquist Olsen, your host, and today is February 1st, 2024. Imagine that, Ed. And
I signed my first check today, absolutely, yes. I went a whole month not knowing what year it was, so now I know.
So anyway, Ed Hands, our town historian, is my guest today. It's a continuation of our Richardson program. And let's talk about the post office. Most of us always thought that Richardson himself designed it because it's a carbon copy of the buildings in the same vicinity, the Ames Free Library, the Oaks Ames Memorial Hall. But it is related to Richardson, and Ed, tell us about that.
Well, it's really not a carbon copy. You have to look carefully. It has that wonderful Richardsonian arch, and it's made in the same materials as the library and the hall. But by the time that the Richardson firm got back 20 years after Richardson died, the first high school, the old Oliver Ames High School that we remember, was built. That was done mainly because the governor was kind of conservative in his style. He never understood Richardson very much. So he had his friend design the high school building as a symmetrical building. So when the Richardson firm got back to Easton, they said, wow, what can we do? Well, they designed a Richardson building that was symmetrical. So if you look at the old post office building, it is symmetrical. You know, you could fold it down the middle and everything would be fine. But it still had all these Richardsonian elements. So it fits. You know, it pays homage to the Richardson buildings around it, but it also says, hey, look, there's other stuff that's newer now. And that's interesting because the Richardsonian style begins to fade away in 1893 when the World's Fair is held in Chicago. And most of the buildings there are done in a Beaux-Arts style, like the Breakers or like Biltmore. And the only person that designs in Richardson style is Louis Sullivan, now a grown-up architect in Chicago. And he designs the Transportation Building, which is a gigantic building with a gigantic Richardsonian arch. And basically, Sullivan's conclusion is that the World's Fair sets American architecture back 40 years because they go back to just copying these fake styles from Europe. So that's the story. That's the story there. And I always point out that at the arch in the old post office building, one side was the post office and one side was a bank. And at the bottom of the Richardsonian arch, there's two little gargoyles. One's counting $5 bills and smiling, and one's counting nickels and frowning. And if you look carefully down the street at the statue of Oliver Ames, it's Oliver Ames.
Right.
That makes it special. So that was 1904, and we've kind of gotten off the track of the other Richardson buildings, and we should quickly mention that the landscaping for the hall and the memorial cairn, which we call the rockery. I can remember some expert coming from out of town saying, "Oh, Olmsted called it the memorial cairn." And I said, "Well, we spent $250,000 to fix the damn thing up. I guess we can call it anything we want." And that kind of shut them up. Not that experts really like to talk to me that much, but that worked out very well. And a shout out to historian Cynthia Zizetsky, who did some work on that project. She's a wonderful scholar of Olmsted, and it was a pleasure to work with her. So the rockery was an Olmsted project. The stairs at the hall were an Olmsted project. And something nobody really knows is that over at the railroad station, that's an Olmsted landscape.
Really?
It's, the problem with Olmsted landscapes is, there's a tree. Well, we need to plant a memorial tree, so we'll put another tree in there, and very soon you don't have a rich Olmsted landscape in anymore. But the contribution of Olmsted to the railroad station is really cool. Think about it. The railroad station has these wonderful, gigantic arches, which is Richardson having a lot of fun. Remember, the Romanesque style was supposedly small windows and didn't let the light in very much. And that the next style, the Gothic style, was all glass walls and all this sort of stuff. Well, Richardson said the Romanesque style can have glass walls too, and that's the way the station is set up. But the station has those gigantic Richardsonian arches for its walls, and then it has a porche cochere where the wagons could drive underneath to drop people off. So if you look carefully, step back, go across the street to the septic system mound and stand on that and look at the driveway. The driveway carries along that design as well with the huge semicircle at an angle, and that's Olmsted's contribution. He designed the roadways at the railway station. Yeah.
But they were buddies, weren't they?
They were really buddies. Yeah. Despite the fact, it was really interesting. Richardson comes from New Orleans. And Olmsted was, if not an outright abolitionist, somebody who had traveled down south and written about the terrible conditions of slavery before the war. His nonfiction works, ultimately put together in a book called The Cotton Kingdom, was as influential as Uncle Tom's Cabin in getting people in the North upset about slavery.
Really?
And so he was, gung-ho for the North, and Richardson came from the South. There was I think it's a 16-year difference in their ages, Richardson being the younger of the two. But they got along famously.
And they met in New York City, right?
They met in New York City. And some of the recent scholarly research says basically Olmsted had already kind of worked out the naturalistic designs that he puts into his landscape, and he talked Richardson into a lot of that. So if you take a look at the hall or the gate lodge or even the railroad station, it fits into the landscape. And that was something that became a trademark of Richardson.
Now, you were talking earlier about the Japanese influence on the depot.
Yeah. You may remember that in 1853, we sent a fleet to Japan. Japan was at that time called the Hermit Kingdom, which the title then got passed to Korea. But they didn't let Westerners in. And finally, we sent a fleet over and basically opened up Japan. So from 1850 onwards, with a delay because of the Civil War, American scholars could now visit Japan and take pictures. And ironically, one of Richardson's friends, several of Richardson's friends, well, let me back up a little bit. Richardson was a known bad bidder. So, yeah, we can build that for $1.50, and then you find out when he builds it, it's $5. He was always overrunning. He overran on the library to the point where the library was completed in 1879 and didn't open until 1883 because they ran out of money for the books, paying Mr. Richardson. So Richardson had a friend, Henry Adams, who had a wife nicknamed Clover. And he and John Hay wanted Richardson to build a duplex for them in Washington. And then typical Richardson, oh, let's make this change and let's do this, and it only costs that much more. And Henry Adams, his wife, was very fragile. And that and whatever other pressures she was under caused her to commit suicide.
Oh, my goodness.
Yes. So, which is one of the dangers of hiring Richardson. And Henry Adams became so despondent that one of his friends named John Lafarge said, look, let's leave this all behind us and we'll go to Japan because I know you're interested in the Japanese religion. You're not interested in the formal Christianity of the 19th century. Let's go to Japan and learn about that. So Henry Adams made Lafarge his literary, not literary, but artistic executor for the memorial to his wife in Washington. And there's this fantastic statue by Augustus St. Gaudens down there. Augustus St. Gaudens also did the bust of Oliver Ames Jr. At the library. It's this hooded figure, sitting, contemplating God knows what. It's a fabulous sculpture, but it is heralded, precursored again by that window of need, because the angel that isn't Mary Frothingham, the blue angel at the bottom, or blue person at the bottom, is exactly the statue. But she's done in glass. So it's a collaboration of John Lafarge's idea and the execution of Augustus St. Gaudens. So they went to Japan, and there were a couple of other Harvard-related people that had gone, and tons of pictures were taken. And we know that Richardson had these picture books in his library, so that when he designed railroad stations, he got the idea of sheltering roofs. I mean, that roof is way too big for the size of the station if you stop and think about it. Mm. And the reason there is that it was supposed to indicate shelter where you're waiting for the train, divided male into female. And the original station actually had wings that came out that you could walk out of the door and never get wet. You could stand out on the platform under these wings. They were eventually taken down. Nobody seems to know quite when, but you can still see the remnants of them if you walk over there.
Are there photos of those
yes.
wings?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and we at the Historical Society, talked about maybe getting a CPA grant and putting them back, but they're expensive. It would be, at the time we were looking at it, which was shortly after the CPA was passed in 2002, it would be $250,000 to put them in then. And what are they there for? Or nobody stands waiting for a train that may never come. And if they do come, the T will certainly mess it up. So because they mess everything up.
So the dragons.
Yes.
Those are wonderful.
Yeah, if you think they're dragons, yeah.
And they're painted orange.
Yeah, that's interesting. The problem with paint colors is the way that you determine a paint color for a historic building is you take a chip and then you take a microscope and look at the layers to see what the bottom layer was. So Paul Berry was curator of the station at the time, and he did that chip analysis and said that this is the Richardsonian color of the original, and that's how we painted it. We painted the interior, the baseboard, many years later, and did a chip analysis there, and went with a slightly more rosier red, but it was definitely red. Yep. So.
Okay, and what about the gargoyles on the Oak Ames Memorial Hall?
Well, the Oak Ames Memorial Hall was the last. Well, back up a little bit. Richardson used a company called Norcross Brothers, and they were among the first general contractors in the United States. A general contractor is somebody who can, you want a stained glass window? Yeah, I'll have our stained glass guy do it. You want gargoyles? We'll have our gargoyle guy do it. And oh, by the way, we have a quarry where we'll get the sandstone for that too. So they were basically trying to monopolize buildings. we believe that the exterior gargoyles were designed by Stanford White, who also designed the fireplace inside the building, and maybe the interior woodwork.
You're talking about the fireplace at the Ames Free Library.
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah, but not in the Oaks Ames Royal Hall.
Oh, yeah, the gargoyles there, yeah, they're not so gargoyle-ish. They're not. There's not a lot of gargoyles there. There's a gargoyle on the south side. That's a very standard Norcross Brothers
One of the things I think is interesting is the oak leaves and the acorns,
yes.
and it as a tribute to Oaks Ames.
Well, it's even more than that. If you look way up at the top of the building where there's a dormer, the dormer has the initials OA. But if you were illiterate like you were supposed to be in the Middle Ages, you could look and you could see the oak leaves and the acorns for Oaks Ames. And on the right-hand side, there are flowers. Those flowers are lilies, which are the #1 flower that you would take to a funeral in the 19th century. So it tells you it's Oaks Ames Memorial Hall.
Right.
And then...
and who designed those?
We don't know. The hall has had a lot of people study the building in the last few years, and I haven't seen anything jump out of the material to tell us who did that. And it's interesting, the story of going back to the library for a second, the arch there tells the story of day to night. There's a rooster on one side and an owl on the other. So the idea is the sun crosses the horizon. At the peak, there's 2 little dragons. At the hall, it took us forever to figure this out, but the artistic motif is the year. The columns, the little short stubby columns that hold up the loggia, are 4-sided. Well, we had some 5th graders look at this when I was doing 5th grade tours. Like, maybe it's Aesop's Fables. So I had my high school students read Aesop's Fables, and except for the fox and the grapes off in the corner over there, it doesn't match up. So I had another group of 5th graders come the next year and say, "Oh, look, there's a bird's nest here, and there's this, and there's this, there's this." It's the 4 seasons. So each one of the columns has a different plant and a different animals, we think mostly representing the 4 seasons. Now, if you look up above, there's the signs of the zodiac. So the hall tells the story of the year. And the coolest thing about the signs of the zodiac up above, there's one sign missing. Do you know what that sign is? I don't either. But if it was tour walking season, I would know. It's the month that Oaks Ames was born. That was his astrological sign. So they didn't put that in because he had passed away. It was just letting you know. So that's.
So the symbolism reflects the story.
Yes. Yeah, the story of the year. And then the other big question is, where did that sundial come from? There was a niche that Richardson designed that when the building was first opened was empty. And then the sundial with the ornate Celtic carvings was put in. And I've been looking for years to find out if the ancient order of Hibernians did that as a tribute to Oaks Ames, who was a great friend of the Irish while he was alive, unlike his dad, who couldn't stand the Irish. But Oaks Ames was a great guy who got a bad raw deal from the New York press because of the Credit Mobilier. It was really the crooks from California who stole more money than the Ames brothers. The Ames brothers finagled as much as they could to complete the job that President Lincoln had given them to them. But if you look at Oaks Ames's finances after he died, his 2 sons, Oaks Anger and the future governor Oliver, pretty much had to mortgage the company to pay off the debts and get things back on their, on a good footing. So Oaks really got a bad deal. He was a great man. Voted for the 13th and 14th Amendments, probably hid fugitive slaves, and spoke out against the fugitive slave law when most people and most politicians in Massachusetts had fallen in behind Daniel Webster, who criminally put that into effect in order to promote his presidential candidacy. But as we know, nobody ever does bad things to promote their presidential candidacy.
So so we have those Japanese influences, the roof,
Yep.
the dragons at the depot. And then we can go to the Gate Lodge, and that was part of the Langwater estate, and the Gate Lodge is on Elm Street, and it's right across from Mary Ames Frothingham's Wayside, which is now our town offices.
Yes.
So tell us a little bit about the Gate Lodge.
Well, let me tell you a little bit about the complex. I mean, Mary Frothingham was a very unique person, and when her father Frederick died relatively young, there were still members of the family, kids at home. The mother apparently had a harder time coping than you might imagine, and so Mary became sort of the surrogate mother and boss of the children. So she stayed there at the Langwater estate for a long time, and then about 1893 to about 20 years later, in 1913, she had Wayside built by Guy Lowell, who was a extremely competent architect, certainly no Richardson, that, as I tell people when we do a tour, there she lived all by herself with her 15 servants. So.
And then she got married.
She got married in her 40s to Louis Frothingham, and they had apparently a very happy marriage. Sadly, Mr. Frothingham died relatively young from a stroke.
And he started serving in the Massachusetts legislature, and then became a congressman.
Yes, and Mary was a sterling opponent of giving women the right to vote. And the wonderful irony is that as soon as women got the right to vote, she became his campaign manager.
I see. But Mary Frothingham led a group of basically women and men who were opposed to women getting the right to vote. And the irony is, it's an incredible coincidence, is that Blanche Ames, wife of Oakes Ames, was on the other side. She headed the group of suffragettes in Massachusetts to get the vote. So here we have family, and how did that work out?
I think it worked out reasonably well, and one of the things that makes me think that is that after World War II, these ladies were still around 20 years after women's suffrage, and when
so was Mary a convert?
No.
You don't know?
No, I don't think she was a convert, but I think she bent to reality and knew that she could run her husband's campaign better than he could, and so she got on the ball.
So that was a woman in a leadership position. Okay.
Well, no. Let's. You asked how did they get along, and I think they got along very well. Going back to the Rockery after World War II. John Ames II had an idea to knock the Rockery down and turn it into a World War II memorial. Would look more like a battleship. And Mary and Blanche got together and prevented that from happening.
Oh, so they became a team. How many buildings in all did he do?
He did about 50 buildings in his lifetime. And they are as far north as, Buffalo, New York, and Vermont, and as far west as Pittsburgh, and I think there might have been, there were a couple in Chicago as well.
Okay, and so when did he, in how many years? I mean, if he died at 46, right?
Basically, his practice was from 1866 to 1886, for just 20 years.
20 years, he did 40 buildings?
50. Yeah.
50?
Yeah.
In 20 years, that's amazing.
And one of the things no one ever talks about is the houses that he did, wooden houses that are just gorgeous examples of what we call the shingle style. He kind of invented that along with Richardson Romanesque.
Yeah.
And we haven't even talked about why Richardson Romanesque is such an original style compared to just a revival style.
Okay, well, so tell us in 30 seconds.
It's because Richardson, instead of just copying buildings, design buildings based on the form of the interior and things that he had learned in France, like unity through repetition, and particularly that those math courses he passed allowed him to hide things like golden triangles and all these particular geometric forms in the design of the building.
Well, the Romanesque arch is so prevalent in his.
Yes.
Okay, we don't have much time left, so
we don't have any time.
Well, let's talk briefly about the Gate Lodge.
Well, Gate Lodge is a unique building. It's made out of natural stone that was put together. It was designed to be overflow housing for people that were visiting the main mansion, which was really very small. And it was also supposed to be a home for the gardener, who refused to live in a newfangled building like that. So the gardener was so well respected by the family, they built him a house up the street, which is the last Richardson building in town. It's just
right, and that's
like
a wooden building.
Yes,
yeah.
But the Gate Lodge is just an amazing thing. It looks like a glacial moraine where the ice came down and just dropped everything off.
Yes, yeah.
And then it was the one time that Olmsted and Richardson disagreed, because Olmsted planted it, the ivy covered it over, and Richardson said, "No, I want the stones to be seen." So all the ivy was torn off.
I see. Okay, well, that does it for today. Thank you, Ed Hands. Again, all about the Richardson's contribution to and Olmsted's contribution to Easton. We are so blessed with all of those contributions, and we're blessed with having you with all this knowledge to contribute to our viewing audience. So thank you, Priscilla Almquist Olsen, bidding you farewell. Until next time, be well.
Community Forum is sponsored by the Easton Grange 196 and a friend of Yardley Wood Rink and the Easton Lions Club.